Thank you very much. We should have microphones, but I'll just start off on a sort of bit of detail, if you don't mind, Stephen. John Steele's asking, should overseas students in the UK higher education be counted in immigration statistics? And would you mind telling us whether the figures you've quoted this evening already, where those students fit into the picture?
Yes, thank you very much. I love this system, by the way. It's like a very scary form of a raffle. Yeah, the student numbers were included in the immigration statistics that were published today. I focused more on work-based migration in my comments. I think that students do need to be included in the statistics because there's a very strong correlation between immigration and social infrastructure and public services. And students who come to our country do have needs. They need housing, sometimes they might need medical assistance. So I think it's important that we, in our immigration statistics, we reflect all of the numbers of people that come here and could potentially reflect the potential pressure on public services. One of the things that's also been agreed is that there should be a reduction in the number of dependents that are coming, because there has actually been quite a big increase in the number of dependents that have come with students. And I think that is, I think we've now taken the measures that are required, and it should not go any further because students play an absolutely crucial role in terms of supporting the financial position of universities and also of enriching the United Kingdom's soft power. Our higher education system is a tremendous asset and a big source of finance and of charm offensive across the world.
We'll turn to gangs. Right, we've got this questions coming in from two people in different ways. So Tony MacDonald, clearly the way to stop illegal migration is to destroy the criminal gangs. You said smash them, didn't you? In your
Yes.
book? He says destroy them who organise and finance the crossings. Do you know who they are? I don't know how closely...
I'll just get on my phone, yeah.
But I'll let you reflect on that. I don't know whether you're getting your phone out. Yes. And Adrian Cartwright says, we hear a lot from all political parties about crushing the people smuggling gangs. Are not the gangs a symptom of the migration problem? And when you remove one, will not two more gangs spring up to fill the lucrative place left? Isn't the drugs trade proof of this? So it's all very well, rhetoric about smashing the gangs. Tell us how it can really be done.
Well, thank you very much. The gangs do appear to be a very diverse and fragmented set of individuals. It doesn't appear to be a system that works on the basis of sort of there being a few kingpins and Mr. Biggs. And if you actually were able to get the Mr. Biggs and prosecute them, you would actually succeed in cutting the head off the snake. It does appear that it's more fragmented and random than that. There's quite a lot of 2 or 3 men operations working a lot off social media, almost advertising their wares back in the communities and villages that they come from, and saying they're promising a land of milk and honey, and then facilitating the journeys. So that does make it more difficult, but I think that there are ways in which cooperation taking place upstream, not just between the UK and European authorities, but also going further east, right across Turkey and into Asia and south all the way to sub-Saharan Africa. We can work more effectively with law enforcement agencies to actually go after those gangs. And in a way, the fact that it's not as if you could just knock out 3 or 4 of them and crush the entire system, but they aren't criminal geniuses, these people. They are small operations that can be relatively easily traced and caught and prosecuted. There has been an improvement in that happening in France, and there has been, I think, the government should take credit for improving the security cooperation to some extent with France, but there's a lot more that can be done there. It's correct, though, that smashing the gangs is absolutely not the silver bullet. The 5-point plan that I set out, that plan won't work unless all 5 points are happening. You can't just say we'll smash the gangs and everything will be fine. And the absolutely crucial piece of that, in my opinion, is the deterrence. You've got to get to a position where people know there's no point giving €4,000 to a people smuggler to get across the channel, because the minute you arrive in the United Kingdom, you'll get sent back to where you came from. That's the only deterrent that will really work. In order to get that deal with the European Union, we, of course, have to do our bit. And that's what I said about having a strictly capped system, which would be us doing our bit in return for the European Union accepting that those dangerous channel crossings are something that have to stop. And of course, politically, it doesn't do Monsieur Macron any favours at all to have large numbers of people massing on the northern coastline of France. That's bad for him politically. It's great news for Marine Le Pen because she can stir things up. So there is a landing space where there is a mutual interest between France and the UK to get this problem sorted out. But of course, if we've spent years burning bridges with France and certain people questioning even whether France was an ally or a foe, that isn't exactly going to create a conducive environment for those negotiations to take place. So I think we just need a more grown-up approach to it, and we need to be talking with the EU about the possibility of getting a returns deal in place, a successor to the Dublin Convention, if you like, that is based on us doing our bit and the European Union accepting that these small boat crossings need to be brought to an end.
I'm going to turn to visas with Graham Daly, and then we'll move on to work. So Graham says, well, I don't know whether we'd need him to explain this a bit more, but why not issue temporary visas to all migrants before they commence travelling, thereby removing the illegal routes automatically? I mean, does that actually... has anyone ever looked at that in a sort of meaningful way? Or do you just have 1 billion people on a temporary visa? What do you think?
I think that there's definitely more that can be done around upstream processing, is the jargon. There are refugee resettlement routes, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, the Afghan route that I mentioned, there's a community sponsorship route. They are all based on the person being in the country from which they wish to leave, applying from that country and being processed. It's often work, if there is a British embassy or consulate that person can safely access, they can make their application there, and there are also online opportunities. Those schemes need to be made to work far more effectively. And the government is actually consulting at the moment with local authorities across the country about creating more safe and legal routes. And I think they're talking about a number of 10,000 that could be through upstream processing and processed in the country that they wish to leave, so that there's no need for them to then use dangerous modes of transport like the small boats. So the answer to that question is that it absolutely has to be part of the mix. And I made some comments about Afghanistan. Afghanistan is just one example of resettlement routes that could and should be made to work far more effectively.
I'm going to take a microphone question in a minute. I'll just sort of finish off with the second aspect of Graham's question is echoed by Linda Sherwood. And basically it's about the fact that asylum seekers are unable to do anything other than await for a decision. And so if they're waiting for 18 months, wouldn't it be sensible to allow them to work, not only from the viewpoint of filling gaps in the labour market, but also mental health perspective, costs to the country, and also the fact that they may slide into criminality. And Graham has also wondered whether this would be beneficial and reduce the cost of having them around. Where have the politicians gone with that issue? Could you sort of tell us what's been going on in the last 10 years on that? particular aspect?
It is a very live debate and has been for some time. The current position is both the government and ours that asylum seekers should be able to work after 12 months. I know there's a lot of pressure from many different groups to reduce that at least to 6 months. And I think it's fair to say that there's an active debate going on around that. The pros and cons are, as you've rightly set out, if asylum seekers are able to work, they would not be needing to be in hotels. They could be out there integrating into society and paying their way. On the negative side of the ledger is, well, what happens then if their application for asylum is refused and they have got themselves into a position where they've been working and they've created a sense of being in the UK on a more permanent basis. It makes the impact and trauma of having your application refused much more difficult, I think. And so there's I think an issue around duty of care and safeguarding. And the other is the potential challenge around, if you did reduce it to 6 months or even less, would it make the UK more, if you like, of a magnet in terms of a place that people wanted to come? However, I note that there is legislation going through the French Assemblée Nationale at the moment to enable asylum seekers to work from day one. And in Australia, they're allowed to work from a very early stage. If I'm not wrong, I think it may be day one as well. So there's a range of different models and ways of looking at this, and I think it's fair to say that it is an active and live debate. But as things stand, our position is that they should be allowed to work after 12 months in occupations that are on the shortage occupation list.
The microphone is on the left-hand side, yes, against the wall, right near the back.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to take up, in fact, you've mostly answered the question that I was going to ask about. Surely the way to get rid of these criminal gangs is to get rid of the demand for them. And you do that by, as you were saying, more, is it upstream processing? But you were talking about processing from people's own countries. But there's an awful lot of countries that people are fleeing from that in no way could they make an application from. So would there not be a way of, in British embassies in various places, having an opportunity to apply for some kind of humanitarian visa or for asylum from there? If you genuinely want to stop dangerous journeys, such as across the Channel, and it is absurd to go back to this notion of, oh, you've got to claim asylum in the first safe country you come from. That is just a recipe for the UK to dismiss any possible asylum claim because we're an island. It won't work. So surely people should be able to apply from another safe country when they get to it.
Shall I? Yes. I agree that the way to stop the gangs is to destroy their business model. And the way you destroy their business model is by having a returns deal in place whereby people who try and cross by irregular means are not able to do so. They're sent back. And as soon as you start having that in place, deterrents only work if they're credible and comprehensive. So the way in which to get that deal is by doing exactly as you say, finding ways of enabling people to come safely and legally. The big question then is, what is the negotiation about? What's on the table from the United Kingdom in order to secure the deal with the European Union? And I mean, one of the frustrating things about being in opposition is we can't negotiate from opposition. I hope that if we are privileged to form a government, one of the first things we'll be doing, I think, is Keir Starmer and other colleagues will be going over to Brussels to talk about a whole range of things, including this. And there will be many different ways, I think, of skinning the cat in terms of getting the deal that we need to have in place that will create an effective deterrence which will stop this problem at its source by destroying the business model of the people smugglers. And that means processing upstream, which can be own country, it can be neighbouring country, or it could be in Europe. There are many options on the table, but until we're in government and we can have those negotiations, I'm not able to preempt what that might look like. But I think the principle of what you're saying is absolutely right, that you've got to destroy the model of the people smugglers, as well as smashing the people smugglers, going after them. You're never going to actually stop them operating because it's a many and varied challenge that you're facing there, but you will destroy them if you destroy their business model, and that is the way to do it. This is a collective problem that requires a collective solution.
We're going to take a question upstairs. I think we've got at least, yes, the second row, just above the projector.
Mr. Kinnock, I've got to pull you back up that last question, because I think you've squirmed out of this a little bit too much. The lady asked about in upstream people. Now, given us an example of somebody, say, in Afghanistan, who's been chased after by the Taliban who want to kill them, how the heck do they get into a place where they can actually put their case forward to gain access to this country or anywhere else?
So that's why I was talking about neighbouring countries. The way the Afghanistan resettlement schemes work is that if you take the ARAP, which is particularly for people that supported our defence, our armed forces in Afghanistan, they are identified. They also make themselves known through the safest possible ways that they can, in terms of saying, I worked as an interpreter, for example, for the armed forces. I didn't manage to get on the planes when Operation Pitting took place. Everyone will remember that chaotic exodus from Afghanistan. So I'm stuck in Kabul. I'm fearing for my life. And the Ministry of Defence and the Home Office then assess that person, check that their identity is who they say they are, and say, yes, you now qualify. Now, a big problem with that is they then have to find a way of getting out of Afghanistan in order to get themselves to Pakistan, which is where they are flown out from. And what I referred to in my speech, one of the, I think, most disgraceful aspects of all of this is that 3,000 of those people are in that situation, and they're stuck in hotels in Pakistan, because in November of last year, Rishi Sunak sent a directive to Whitehall, basically saying, we have to stop bringing ARAP and ACRS Afghans on those resettlement schemes from Pakistan to the UK until they have accommodation, because we can't keep putting them in hotels. What that did was left those people in Pakistan, and about 6 weeks ago, the Pakistani government said, right, we're kicking them all out by the 1st of November, and we're going to send them all back to Afghanistan. And so you've got people then literally with a target on their backs, potentially being sent back to Afghanistan. The only reason they've come to Pakistan is because we, the British government, have told them to come to Pakistan as a stepping stone to getting to the UK. So the scheme has broken down because of the issue around hotels and accommodation. And I think that is an absolutely awful situation. But the upstream processing can take place in a number of different ways, either in the country of origin, or in a neighbouring country, or in Europe. There's many, many ways to look at it.
Let's talk about the you mentioned the hotels and the accommodation, and we got a couple of questions here from, first one, Jan Ferguson. So she says, she says, I haven't got one of these 400 hotels on my street, but what can be done to bring about a fairer, more humane hosting of people awaiting these decisions in order to dissipate the fear and prejudice of people in places where they are, and to give them dignity and respect to these people as well. Margaret Dale, assuming the decision-making process can be speeded up and the hotels emptied, how and where will alternative housing be provided for these applicants? And can the government fund savings into novel housing solutions? Could I add to that, just add to your burden, because we haven't talked that much about Ukrainian refugees, but I happen to know personally that of friends who have taken them into their homes, and there has been a scheme. So could you sort of explore whether actually the systems that we have are really fair to all the people who want help, or are we sort of, in some subtle way, discriminating between Ukrainians, Afghans, and so on. So we start off with the hotel
Yes,
issue.
yes. Actually,
and fair-
it's very,
and
very good you raised
dignity.
Ukraine because it's connected. Well, look, I mean, there's an awful old cliche, isn't there? Joined up government. And people probably sigh and go, oh my God, that's such a blast from the new Labour past. But it really is a case of joined up government being required. So when people come here and apply for asylum, there has to be a recognition that that is a cross-government challenge. It is up to the Home Office to process them in a rapid, efficient, and fair and humane way. And it is also up to the Home Office to know from a fairly early stage that somebody is quite likely to be getting asylum. It's worth bearing in mind that there was about 5 countries that have asylum grant rates of over 90%. Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, Sudan, and Eritrea. So if you've got somebody coming from one of those countries, you know there's a 90% chance that they're going to be granted. Common sense dictates that from that moment that the application goes in, the Home Office should be working with the Department for Local DLUC, Department for Local Government and Levelling Up, with the local authorities in across the country, with the third sector. I think also with with people who've been granted refugee status from those communities, in order to start the process of getting that person integrated. That person is likely to get granted asylum. How do we integrate them effectively so that when they get their leave to remain, they're not then just booted out and given 20 days to try and find accommodation. So you've got a plan in place for their accommodation. You've got working with the local job centre to help them to see opportunities in the labour market. There should be good English language provision that is being organised. If that person has family with them, you need to be looking at the whole schools and GP and other issues as well to ensure that there's a kind of move-on strategy. And if you had efficient and effective processing combined with joined-up government on the integration side and the move-on side, then I think you'd have a process that wouldn't need people in hotels at all, because the Home Office has an asylum estate which can accommodate about 55,000 people. So the reason that we have all these people in hotels is because there's far more people in the system than the 55,000 that are in cost-effective, Home Office-owned and managed accommodation. So what we need to do, in the first instance, is get that backlog down to 55,000. So you've got a flow of people going through appropriate Home Office accommodation. So that's about the processing, leave to remain, get them out into the community, get them work. Once they've got leave to remain, they can work, start earning a salary, start standing on their own 2 feet, and I think contributing a huge amount to our economy and our society. It's about fulfilling the basic functions of government. It's not rocket science. It's about having a team-based approach where the Home Office actually talks to other parts of Whitehall rather than burying its head in the sand, and where local government, devolved administrations, third sector work together to actually get these problems sorted out rather than making a big fuss about it and having lots of drama. And in terms of Ukraine, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because the crucial thing about Ukraine was the Homes for Ukraine scheme. And that was radically different to anything that we'd done before. And what a huge success it was. 110,000 British households offered to open up their arms and embrace the Ukrainian people coming across. And in the end, there was a surplus of homes, because many Ukrainians already had contacts in the UK, so they didn't need the Homes for Ukraine scheme. They made their own arrangements. Why didn't we use that surplus to offer to, say, the Afghans? Rather than having 8,000 Afghans in hotels, there should have been a box that you tick saying, yes, I want to be part of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, and then it should have said, if it's not possible for us to find you a Ukrainian family to look after, would you take an Afghan family?
Oh.
Or whatever,
Well, yeah.
or any other nationality. So, that I think would have been much, much more sensible. But you're right, there's another route called a community sponsorship route, which is where a community can come together and say there's a number of families in this community that would be very happy to house an Afghan. That community sponsorship scheme is just beset with vast amounts of bureaucracy and red tape. So of course you have to make sure you look at safeguarding issues, you do the checks and all the rest of it, as did eventually happen with the Ukrainian scheme. But it's not rocket science to tap into the compassion and generosity of the British people, solve issues around pressure on accommodation, and promote harmonious community relations. That is what the Ukraine scheme succeeded in doing, and I genuinely believe that could happen across other schemes as well, if there was a bit of imagination and innovation and coordination in the system.
I've got some questions here about good migration, and then we're going to take a question from the floor in front. And put your hand up if you'd like the microphone, please, and so the team can see you. Right, so Mark Dormer. Royal Stoke Hospital proudly displays the flags of 96 nationalities represented in its workforce. Many universities depend on overseas students. Is it time to be more positive about immigration as a country? Liz Hill. Given the advice of James Lovelock in the 90s, that a combination of climate change, economic instability is likely to swell the UK population to 200 million by the end of the century, apparently. Why is the UK government so keen on preventing young, educated people from coming here? Because she thinks we need them. And Jonathan Dannett, immigration has many benefits economically and culturally. Even the Conservatives think so, he says. How do we convince... I don't know why he says that, but that's what it says. How do we convince Daily Mail readers that it's a positive... I don't know if we have any Daily Mail readers here, but they could perhaps answer. And get provision of health, education, etc. approved rather than what Jonathan considers to be the current abhorrence. So, I mean, is this impossible territory for a politician to go into, trying to sell immigration in a positive way, as these three members have described it?
I think it absolutely is, but I genuinely believe that you have to embed your compassion in control and competence. I think one of the problems we have with the immigration debate in this country, like so many of our debates tending to get more and more polarized, is that it's either compassion or control. And I think that is a false binary. I think that actually compassion and control are mutually reinforcing principles. And if we are able to stand up and say, we're just going to competently take all the heat out of this issue and take the decisions that need to be taken when you are an efficient and effective government in order to get the processing working more effectively, get people out of the hotels, get people leave to remain so that they can work and become part of the community, get the community sponsorship schemes working more effectively, offer something like the Homes for Ukraine scheme, show that we're collectively working on this with our European partners and neighbours in a sensible and pragmatic way. I think you will then absolutely win the trust and the support of the British people. Like any system in any walk of life, it needs people in, whether it's in an office or a football team or a charity or any organisation that you care to think of, people have to believe in the basic system that is being used to run that organisation. And the state and our immigration system are no exceptions to that. And if there's a feeling that it isn't being managed properly and there's a sense of it's just anarchy and there are people who are gaming a system, there are people who are being treated unfairly and that's not working either, then trust and confidence in the entire system gets eroded. So I think there absolutely is a space for us to make a far more positive and upbeat case for the huge value that immigration brings to our society, but you have to do it from a basis, a platform of competence and trust and confidence in the system. Once you have built that platform and it's solidly standing on its foundations, I absolutely believe that we can use that to launch into just changing the narrative on immigration, and we need to do that, because I think people find it, far too, as things stand, it's far too polarized and far too divisive, and it seems to be more and more about pitting communities against each other rather than promoting harmonious relations between communities.
We've got questions. We've got a question on the front row here, and then we know that you've got a question upstairs. We will come to you. So this one first.
Mr. Kinnock, at the start of your talk, you mentioned Putin a couple of times, and then at the start of the Q&A, you've mentioned the criminal gangs and other actors in this. The Finnish government recently closed 9 of its border posts, of its 13 border posts with Russia, and obviously a while ago, Belarus was funneling in Middle Eastern and African immigrants into Europe. Given that Putin's got the motive and the means, are you aware of his activities elsewhere in that regard?
I think that people like Vladimir Putin will do whatever they can to weaken and undermine the resolve of the West, and to try to exploit what I think they see. I think people like Putin see immigration as our Achilles heel, and they see that it is something that's being weaponized by certain politicians in countries across Europe, and they're the kind of politicians that the Kremlin loves. So there's no doubt at all that we have to be alive to that issue. It's a very, very difficult thing to act on or regulate, because if it's being organized by the agents of the Kremlin, how you crack down on that is not obvious to me. But I do think that it underlines the need for strong border security in places like Finland. It was also the issue where they were coming across from Belarus into Poland as well, and deliberately trying to put more pressure on Poland just at the time when it was taking very large numbers of people from Ukraine. I think that the broader answer, as I was saying in the speech, is let's just never forget that foreign policy and domestic policy are two sides of the same coin. And what we have learned is that the West has been profoundly naive and complacent in the way that it's responded to the rise of authoritarians over the last 20 to 25 years. We're finally having that reality check, but my goodness, it's costing us. And we should have been much, much tougher on Putin back in 2014 when he took Crimea. The West rolled over, and he took that as a green light to do whatever he wanted to do. I think it just shows that appeasement never works, and if you base your foreign policy on appeasement, you will end up in a very, very bad place indeed. So we've learned that lesson the hard way. I don't know how many more times we have to learn it, but with Putin, we just have to now stand foursquare behind the Ukrainian people. I really hope that American politics goes in a direction which will continue to see support for Ukraine. And that is the only way, I think. The way to defeat Putin is to ensure that he's defeated in Ukraine. And I do think that if that happens, and he's clearly seen to be defeated in Ukraine, we will start to see some kind of change in Russia. I don't think it will be a land of milk and honey. I don't think people are going to be singing Kumbaya and extolling the virtues of democracy. But I do think that even the kind of strong men around him that are most likely to take over won't want to continue with all of the policies that Putin has been pursuing. So I think it's one of those issues which is almost impossible to control. If they are indeed weaponizing immigration, not a lot we can do about that. But what we can do is learn the lessons of what's happened around Ukraine and ensure that it never happens again.
We're going to take a microphone question. It's right in the centre, upstairs.
Thank you, Mr. Kinnock. I don't have the relevant figures, but I believe a substantial number of immigrants have deliberately destroyed their passports so that we don't know who they are or where they're from. And allied to that, I believe that some countries are reluctant to have them back anyway. So is there anything that any government could do to address those problems?
Yeah, that is said. I simply don't know for sure how much that is happening, but I am sure that it does happen. I am sure that identification papers do get destroyed. The first step in the processing when somebody comes in and applies for asylum is the ID checks. And there are, in the Home Office caseworkers and decision makers have access to a wide range of interpreters and people from the countries that are generating asylum seekers. And they do an interview with them where they say, right, where are you from? Obviously in the mother tongue, so they check that that's the mother tongue genuinely of the country that they come from. And they then start talking to them about where they're from and where they are. And they do things like geolocation of the street they say they lived on, the school they say they went to. And so there is quite a rigorous way of establishing that that person genuinely is the person that they say they are. And those interviews often go on for a number of hours until the people doing the interview are satisfied that that it is genuine. On your point about returns, you're absolutely right, so that of the 176,000 people that are in the backlog, 40,000 are people who've had all of their claims rejected and the appeals process exhausted. But the returns and removals have dropped off a cliff. One of the things I've been trying to do since I took up this role as Shadow Immigration Minister is get to the bottom of why that's happening. And it's been quite difficult to do, partly because there's absolutely no cooperation. I'm not allowed to talk to civil servants in the Home Office. I'm prevented from getting under the bonnet of the car, if you like, to try and look at what's going on in the engine. But for some reason, removals have dropped off a cliff. And we've ended up then with 40,000 people whose claims have not been successful. Now, we need to look at the countries where, you know, if you look at a country like India, India has a grant rate of about 4%. But there has been an increase in the number of Indians who are coming across on small boats, and they're not being returned. Now, you might wonder, is that because the United Kingdom is currently trying to strike a trade deal with India? I don't know. I'm just speculating. But there's sometimes politics gets involved with the countries where we need to return people to because their claims have been unsuccessful. Sometimes I think there's a difference of opinion between the Foreign Common and Development Office, who've got kind of diplomatic relationships that they want to protect, and the Home Office, who want to send people back. All of that needs to get sorted out and resolved. And I would support taking a robust position on that and saying to those countries, well, look, you know, we want to have good diplomatic and trading relationships with you, but we've got some of your citizens in our country who are not genuine refugees and need to be sent back to your country. Let's sit down and talk about how we make that happen. But somewhere along the line, that has stopped happening, and we need to get to the bottom of why. And as things stand, I'm not entirely clear on why that is.
For some reason, John and Marie Potter sort of see a parallel in your approach with mending the potholes in the roads, which brings them to the question, when the system is working properly, as you described, we didn't hear how long it will take to carry all that out. What would be your analysis of the steady state, the future sources of immigration and their impact on the UK? So they're wondering whether it would be a legacy of empire, our links to the Commonwealth, climate issues. Is there any view as to what sort of level of immigration or type of immigration we would want to get to when all this mess is sorted out?
Yeah, I think a number of elements to that. One is that we want to have a system which gets us the immigration that we need for our economy to grow and be dynamic and to go up the value chain. So we need skilled workers that are coming here to do high value added jobs on good salaries and making a really valued and excellent contribution. I think we also need to look at what our public services need, but whilst in parallel ensuring that we are investing in training up our own doctors, nurses, and care workers. So I think there'll always be a need for some migrant labour to work in our public services, and I think that's very, very welcome indeed. And the other I would say is I would like to see some rebalancing back to having more people from the continent of Europe coming here. I think there has been a very significant dropping off in the number of European citizens coming to the UK. The immigration statistics I read out earlier is almost all accounted for by a big increase in non-EU migration, and that brings fantastic diversity and lots of skills, and very, very welcome. But I also feel that our European partners and allies, that they are, geography is destiny, and we need to ensure that those people-to-people connections, getting those, the young people being able to work and travel across Europe, let's get the Erasmus scheme and things like that up and running and working more effectively again, and rebuilding the connections with Europe, which I'm afraid have come under very severe strain in the last 6 or 7 years. So I think those would be the three elements for me in terms of getting that mix right, high skill and rebalanced, and making sure that we've got good support for our public services without precluding our local homegrown talent from maximising their opportunities and their access to good job opportunities.
Could I share with you some questions from younger people here? Yeah, and so we got our two students who are running around with the mic. So they've noticed the recent right-wing threats to RNLI people who are helping asylum seekers in the Channel. I don't know how bad a situation that is, but they're wondering how much has the rise of the far right and populist parties across Europe affected the narrative on immigration. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, the abuse of the RNLI, absolutely disgraceful. The RNLI is a heroic organisation that is doing tremendous work and often putting their own lives at risk. And I am frankly amazed that we haven't had more deaths in the Channel when you consider these boats that these people are on are utterly unseaworthy, and it's a very, very busy set of shipping lanes, and it's thanks in large part to the work the RNLI does, and it is our duty to save lives and protect people who are in danger. The rise of the far right is absolutely a factor in all of this, but a little bit like what I was saying about those who support the liberal, progressive, rules-based world order have been very naive and complacent and asleep at the wheel and allowed the rise of the authoritarians across the world. I would say the same about domestic politics in many European countries and indeed in the United States, where the complacency and the failure to robustly defend those liberal progressive values, and also on the issue of immigration, a tendency in some quarters to dismiss anyone who has concerns about immigration as a racist or a xenophobe. That has actually created fertile ground for the far right. I think we've seen a vacating of the space around immigration, where it was, if you look at the sort of the control compassion spectrum, it was all on the compassion side, and it's wonderful that people have those values, but you also have to show that you are plugged in and connected to the concerns that people have about impact on public services, about local job opportunities, about what it means for my community, what it means for my country, what it means for where our place in the world. You can't. If you just walk away from that debate, you vacate the space, and into that vacuum, there will come all sorts of dark and damaging and divisive forces. So I suppose I absolutely do think that the rise of the far right is an issue, but those of us who oppose the far right must take our share of responsibility for having vacated the space and allowed a vacuum to occur, and into that vacuum those forces have come. So the reality check has come, I think, and I think there is a sense that we do have to stand up for what we believe in. We have to stand up for what we believe in a smart way that is rooted in both the control side of this debate and the compassion side of this debate.
I've got a question that's a bit off track from immigration, but it's, if you promise to answer it in less than 1 minute.
Yeah, I'll try my best.
Put it. It's from an A-level student called Isabel, who's here with us. I can't see where she is, but she's wondering, how did you get into politics?
Well, that's a bit of a weird one for me, because obviously it was literally mother's milk. I've been in and around politics my whole life because my family is very political, and of course my father was a member of parliament, and from 1983 to 1993 was leader of the Labour Party. So yeah, but I didn't actually get elected until 2015, when I was 45 years old, and that was partly because certainly through my 20s I had absolutely no interest in getting into politics and needed to escape from the whole thing and do my own thing. But then probably round about in my 30s, this annoying little voice in the back of my head started saying, you know, actually this, and I am a political animal, and I had to come to terms with that fact and stood for Parliament, and unfortunately got elected. But I've certainly never regretted waiting that long. I think Parliament needs people who've been out there and done different stuff before becoming MPs. Not right across the board, and it's horses for courses, but that was the course I took. Was that a minute?
Yeah, I think so. Right. Media. Now, we've got several questions about that. I mean, Tim Handley's saying, how can we restore a decent, rational approach, given what he calls the insidious record of our national media? Julie Grant, is your biggest challenge explaining immigration strategy to the UK media? Let's just, and you might want to break that down a little bit into the daily press, whatever. I'll leave you to decide how much detail to go into.
I think that the media is always a challenge for the Labour Party. I mean, the reality is that the biggest media outlets in terms of the printed media are right of centre, and it is also the case, I think, that the front page of the Daily Mail does influence the editorial line of the BBC at times, and certainly their choice of what are the priority stories. So I think that is a reality that we just have to deal with. I mean, I'm not really sure what we can do about it. I'm a passionate believer in a free press, but I do think that there is a real problem with people who have a particular agenda owning large numbers of newspapers. There's too much concentration of power in our media, particularly around the Murdoch family, and that, I think, is not good for our politics, and it's something that I would love to see changed with some sort of better regulation. But we are where we are, and what we always have to do then is just be twice as good as the other guys, and twice as powerful in the arguments that we make, never being preachy or self-righteous in terms of trying to win over the people that we need to win over, much more about listening, engaging, persuading, and winning those debates. I also think that the rise of social media, whilst it's had lots of negative impacts, it has undermined the power of the tabloid press. I mean, I remember very well, I bear the scars of the 1992 general election, for example, where I do think there were one or two front pages of The Sun which really did have a big impact, and millions of people across the country used to read those newspapers. That just isn't the case anymore. Their readership has fallen off a cliff since then. So I think it's a more balanced media picture as things stand, but the odds are always stacked against us on that, and I think we just have to price that in.
We've got a question upstairs on the right-hand side.
The UK has got one of the highest densities of population on the planet. People are coming over in greater numbers each year from very large countries with accommodation and space. Can you tell me how it's possible, from a pragmatic point of view, to continue to host greater and greater numbers of people, no matter what their cause is, in a country which is 80 miles across in parts, in terms of water, electricity, gas, hospitalisation and schooling?
Thank you.
So that is precisely why we need control. And I believe that we need immigration because we don't have all of the skills that are required in this country to do all of the jobs that are there. We thrive on diversity. I think diversity is a good thing from the point of view of our economy and of our society. And it is also a reality. We live in an incredibly interconnected world. So the idea that it's simply not possible to just pull up the drawbridge and not be connected to the world. And once you're connected to the world through travel, through communications, you are going to have people who move from one country to another. And of course, there's many, many, many Brits every year that leave the United Kingdom and go to other countries. And I'm sure that that is ultimately a benefit both to us and to them and to the countries that they go to. So it is a quid pro quo that I think is needed, but it cannot be something which looks like it's completely uncontrolled and isn't working for the population. That's why Labour supports the points-based immigration system. We actually created the points-based immigration system in 2008. Of course, the non-EU, we were a member of the European Union then, so there's free movement of labour within the EU, but for non-EU, we introduced the points-based system. So we support it, but the points-based system isn't working as well as it could. It's too much of a blunt instrument. It needs to be much better connected to the needs of the workforce, and employers need to be made to train up local homegrown talent rather than constantly reaching for overseas labour. And then there is the asylum piece. I mean, actually, the asylum numbers are by far the smallest component of overall immigration. The biggest is the work-based visas. Then there's the rather unique circumstances of Ukraine and Hong Kong, something of a one-off, really. And then there's students, and only then is there, and then there's family visas, and then there's asylum. So asylum's the smallest component of it, but of course it's the one that makes the most noise, particularly because of the chaos and of the small boats in the channel. So again, that brings us back to control. That is about stopping that chaotic system, and I think if we did that, it would actually have a positive effect of giving people confidence right across the board that we have the immigration that we need, rather than the immigration that we're getting almost without having a say in the matter. So I take your point. You know, there is resources are not unlimited. There is we do have a densely populated country, and we've got to balance and manage all of these things. But let's also never forget that one of the reasons that we're struggling around housing is not because of immigration, it's because of 13 years of a failure to build enough houses. One of the reasons that we have pressure on schools is because there hasn't been enough investment, and we're now seeing schools with literally crumbling ceilings falling down. One of the reasons that we have pressure on our NHS is because we have 7.8 million people on NHS waiting lists, and that's an issue that's been developing for a very long time. Immigrants, generally speaking, are youngish, fit, healthy, mostly work, and end up contributing more to the exchequer than they take out of it. So I think we absolutely have to recognise that there is pressure on resources. We are in a cost of living crisis, but also not conflate that too much with immigration, because the two issues are not intrinsically linked to each other.
I'm just going to finish on one awkward area for you, because it's expressed by a number of members, Bodil Ashton and Alistair Duncan, in different ways. And sort of Alistair says it seems to him that the 5 policy points that you made can't be delivered, incapable of being delivered, without the cooperation of third parties outside the UK. So he's wondering, really, whether you can provide any guarantees that they're deliverable. I mean, you have talked about trips into Europe, but Ashton wonders whether any other country, third-party country, would want to have non-successful refugees, people that we don't want to have. So could you just say a couple of things that might tell us what would be the reach of connecting with third-party, presumably governments and organisations, to actually move things in the right direction?
So I'm sure everybody in this room has been involved in negotiations all the way through their lives. You have negotiations in the business you work in, the organisation you work in. Negotiations within families take place all the time with varying degrees of success. And everybody knows that to be successful in a negotiation, that it has to be based on give and take. You don't go into a negotiation saying, I'd like to have my cake and I'd like to eat it too, please. And those kind of negotiations never work. And I think we certainly saw that in terms of the Brexit negotiations and the way that much of that was handled. Now, who can ever forget that photograph of David Davis sitting with Michel Barnier, and Barnier had that big, well-prepared set of files and all the markers, and David Davis was sitting there with a biro and his glasses case. So you've got to go in with a clear negotiating strategy, which is based on give and take. And that, I talked about the returns deal with the European Union. That has to be based on Keir Starmer and David Lammy and other colleagues going to Brussels with a realistic and pragmatic mindset which says, we've got a problem here that everybody needs to solve. It doesn't help anybody to have thousands of people massing on the coastline of northern France. Nobody benefits from that apart from the far right in both the UK and in France and indeed across Europe. We need to solve that problem. What do we need to do to solve it? This is our offer. This is what we think we can manage to do, and what do you think of that? And then you have that negotiation. And that is based on us looking at the family reunion and safe routes that we've talked about, the upstream processing that we've talked about. All of that needs to be in the mix for a negotiation, but I can't negotiate from opposition. So I can't preempt and flesh out what that negotiation looked like. So I know people are skeptical. I know people think, oh, well, look how it goes with Europe. It's not great and it's not going to be deliverable. But I just think that's a counsel of despair. The point of politics is to negotiate. It is to find common ground. It is to show that there is a win-win, that there's a compromise. You won't get everything you want. Everyone has to take a little bit of pain, politically, financially, whatever it might be, but the outcome will be something where you find a collective solution to a collective problem. And so my answer to that question is based on get stuck in, get round the negotiating table, be grown up, be realistic, be prepared to compromise, and I think on that basis you can do a deal with the European Union and with other countries. And then there's non-EU countries. There's a big piece there around bilateral negotiations. Things like the removals, things like taking a share of and help supporting neighbouring countries, using our development aid programme much more effectively for humanitarian aid and helping people who are fleeing war and persecution whilst they're in the neighbouring countries, in a way that means they don't need to leave the neighbouring country and try and come to Europe. The vast majority of people would much rather go home when the conflict is over. And it's much easier to go home when the conflict is over if you're just in a neighbouring country where you haven't had to risk life and limb to come to the UK. So it's about enlightened self-interest. It's about using our development aid far more effectively and strategically, and it's about negotiating like adults with the European Union.
There, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave it. I would like to apologise to all the people who put in other really interesting questions, and we just haven't had time to cover them. And there was one that I didn't put because I didn't think it was appropriate from Stephen. Does the Labour Party need a shadow minister for common sense? I don't think it was don't think it was a reference to tonight. But
we definitely need more common sense, but in our politics.
I can think there's only one job worse than being shadow minister for immigration, and it must be being minister
for immigration.
So I'm very grateful to Stephen for coming here tonight to explore the difficulties, the awkwardnesses, and all the problems that we appear to be facing. He has, of course, explained some of the policies that he thinks might move things forward, when. But that will be for you to reflect on in the usual way as you go home. But I hope you found this evening very informative, and the Q&A was a good give and take in our usual fashion. So I'm really grateful to Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.